MC. Back to the block, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Funky, yeah, the dot went solo on that ass, but it's still the same. Long Beach is the spot where I serve McCain.
I got into the Snoop Dogg Scott Fishbowl division, and I am happy. Clearly. Hey, everybody, I'm Jorge Edwards, and welcome to Fourth and Frames, the fantasy football podcast for fantasyandframes.com. As normally, we have the usual cast of suspects here. We got Teddy Ricketson, Nate Markham, Brian Ford. How you all doing today?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
Sir. Bringing me back to high school with Snoop Dogg. Fun fact, real quick, about that album.
Go for it.
It's the first debut album to enter the Billboard charts already at number one.
I did not know that. That's probably eighth grade for me, seventh or eighth grade.
Fun fact of the day.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Last weekend, my godson was staying with us, and I know this is horrible god parenting. We watched 8 Mile, and then he's like, "Oh, this is pretty cool. This hip hop from back in the day." I'm like, "Back in the day? Don't ever speak those words again." And then he wanted to watch more Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, so I showed him their performance of "Who Am I? What's My Name" from the Up in Smoke tour from 2000. For those who remember back in the day, that was probably one of the most awesome hip hop concert tours that I think we'll ever see in anytime soon. But anyhow, you're not here for hip hop concert tour information. You're here for rookie evaluations of individual defensive players. Well, maybe now going forward.
I was about to say, maybe tune in.
You never know. So before we get to that, as you know, we like to get to the point. But before we get to the point, we have another point to get to. The Four-Eyed Championships. So we're going to scale back the number of teams that are participating just because we want to get, divisions selected quickly. We want to get these drafts going. We want people to get more involved and be involved because I know the people who have signed up, they're really excited. And we're just going to, decide to scale back a bit from what we were intending to do and just grow this thing naturally and really make it a really special event for those who chose to participate. And we thank you for doing that. So we're going to go back to what we did last year with 48 teams. And for those who don't make the tournament this year, we're going to have a couple of satellite tournaments, and so the winners of these satellite tournaments will get an automatic entry into the Four-Eyed Championships next year. So that is what we're going to be doing pretty soon. So within the next week and a half, you should expect to get an email for those who have signed up that you have made either the Four-Eyed Championships or the satellite tournament. And our first comment of the day is, "What up, studs?" Okay. And thank you, Bauer. Michael Bauer of the Dynasty Rewind podcast.
Really nice of him.
And the next comment comes from somebody who we in the fantasy football community, I think, should be very proud of. 50 Shades of Drunk. IDP is lame, but buddy, your IDP scoring settings are now the default settings over at Sleeper. So congratulations, Jordan Rains, who's 50 Shades of Drunk on Twitter. Give him a follow. He does a lot of great stuff with IDP 123. It's a great scoring setting. In fact, for the Four-Eyed Championships tournament, we will have offensive players, we will have IDP players, and the IDP scoring settings will be IDP 123. So we'll have more on that as we get closer to draft time, and we'll be sure to have Jordan on to talk about that going forward. So let's just get into it. Rookie evaluations of individual defensive players. When we were doing our pregame podcast, group discussion. Hold on, one more thing. Jordan, appreciate the love and support from you guys. Likewise, buddy. Nate basically is like, so I have 57 handwritten pages of notes for this podcast episode today. So I feel like I should just turn the reins over to Nate for some of this stuff. So let's just go around the frames real quickly. Who doesn't have a lot of experience with IDP? That would be Teddy and Brian. Brian, you're in the Four-Eyed Championships this year. What is it about IDP that kind of interests you as somebody who just normally doesn't play it?
Well, my tag, as you can see, my handle above my head here is FF Junkie, and so I'm addicted to anything fantasy football. So if it's something I haven't tried yet, just like if it's a drug I haven't tried yet, I'll I'll give it a whirl, and take anything once. So no, I just it's another way to play.
Say a foodie hasn't tried.
You know what? Food can be a drug. You don't stop that.
Oh,
That's
for
fair.
sure,
That's fair.
for sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
You
I've
can get
over-
50
I've-
shades
I've-
of drunk together.
I've overdosed on Reese's peanut butter cups before, so I know what that's like.
Glorious.
Teddy, what about you? What is about IDP that you find so interesting? That you want to give it a shot.
I think it helps you appreciate the game more because I used to say, well, then you get to pay attention to both sides of the ball. And I realized that was stupid because there's always an offense on the field. But, it's just like I really like getting to know everyone on the field. And I like that there's a way for defense to be included because I personally don't love drafting bulk defensive special teams. I actually when I first started kind of dabbling in fantasy football, found ESPN leagues with like individual defensive player, but it was mainly because I was a Panthers fan and really wanted Luke Kuechly. And so, just kind of that's kind of boiled over to wanting to learn more about the game. And then I think this is just a really cool way to be like kind of like an all-encompassing fantasy football format.
And Nate,
Much more wholesome answer there.
Yes.
And something about drugs and new stuff. And yeah.
And Jordan Rands is commenting that, that's why we play, for the players and the game. You're absolutely right. For me personally, I don't know what it's like to play in a non-IDP league. Every fantasy football league I've ever played in, starting back in the 2000s, has always had an IDP player. And it wasn't until 2013 that I got into leagues where it was like 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 2 defensive backs. And that's kind of been, for me, the gold standard in terms of roster construction. And of course, over time, the scoring settings have changed and have evolved to incorporate different players. And so, and that's been great. It's been great for the growth of IDP, and it's just a lot of fun, new players to, names to learn, jerseys to get, rooting interests. Everybody loves seeing the big touchdown catch, but, let's face it, some of us like seeing guys get, wrecked and like tackled to the ground and sacked into oblivion. You know what I mean? That's fun. Like everybody remembers that, Reggie Bush hit by the Eagles guy back in the playoffs back in 2006. I mean, that was just an amazing. I know that's pretty obscure.
I was about to say, I don't know if that's a great point. You say by that Eagles guy.
Remember that one guy?
It doesn't matter. Sheldon Brown, Sheldon something.
Sheldon.
And Sheldon, if you're listening, I'm sure.
At the very least, it did make the NFL draft this year a lot more fun with going IDP and like seeing where people place. Because now when I watch the NFL draft, I only hate offensive linemen because they mean nothing to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, as much as round 1 was offensive players for fantasy football purposes, I feel like the second and third round were really big IDP. Mm-hmm. Sheldon Brown, an Eagles fan. There you go. Sheldon Brown is the guy who laid the hit on Reggie Bush. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go on YouTube.
It was Nate Gary. No,
Michael Bauer's favorite Eagle. Yeah. Who's not an Eagle anymore.
Ex-Eagle, yeah.
So let's just get into some rookies and some that have IDP value, we believe, from a fantasy football perspective. And I'm just going to go, if this is okay with you, I'm just going to go like team by team, and then we'll just kind of jump in, and then, we'll just make this a big hodgepodge of IDP players. And the first thing you have to remember when it comes to IDP, there are 2 types of players that can be IDP valuable. Okay. The first type of player is like your stud athlete who can go out and make plays all over the field. And yeah, great, fantastic. Those are the guys you obviously want on your team. Mm-hmm. However, for IDP, unlike on offense, players who maybe are not good at being defensive players, but get opportunity to make plays. And let me just give you an example. And this team fits the mold right here, the Dallas Cowboys. Micah Parsons, I think, him at middle linebacker, he's going to be a great, elite player at the position, going to get plenty of tackle opportunities playing that middle position. But according to ourlads.com, Kelvin Joseph, rookie at left cornerback, when you have an inexperienced player on defense starting, opposing teams, opposing offenses normally target that player. So that kind of gives that player extra opportunities for pass breakups, for interceptions, for tackles.
Mhm.
And you know what? For IDP purposes, for fantasy football purposes, however you get those fantasy points, the better. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's either a matter of talent or a matter of opportunity. Would you agree, Nate, or is there something that you don't agree with?
No, I agree with that. That's why I try to, for the most part, I avoid corners, especially going into a rookie season. I have a hard time unless like we've talked about in the past, if it's a specific corner, if they break down the secondary into cornerback and free safety and strong safety, not too many leagues do that. But if that's the situation, then of course I'm going with the heavily targeted corner who typically has a shutdown on the opposite side. Like I think last year, not the exact same scenario, but Jeff Gladney had some weeks where he was heavily targeted, made huge plays, and was in that top 15 on a week. And then the next week he'd be 38th. And so you can't week in and week out. And that's one of the concerns I had. Going back to you talking about being in IDP leagues, that's honestly one of the reasons why I got out of IDP is that the format was too narrow of scope. They had one IDP player per team. So you had 12 players, maybe 24, and it was a random crapshoot. You pick up a person, drop a person, and the range of outcomes and the latitude of scoring was so narrow that there was really no skill set to it. And it wasn't a skill as much as it was you guesstimate and your linebacker gets a pick six. Congratulations, versus the consistent everything. So I love the formats now where we have so many different players. It makes it, to me, I like strategy, and that's what it becomes. It becomes strategic. And kind of like you're saying, is there a strategy in picking a corner over a strong safety? Usually no.
Right. Well, and it goes back to like what you were saying. Also, the scoring settings have evolved to compensate for not, normally for IDP, 10 years ago, it was get your middle linebackers. They're the run stoppers, and that's all you need. Don't worry about your corners, your free safeties, your defense. Get a really good defensive lineman who may get you sacks, but more often than not, get your linebackers because they get the tackles.
Right.
Well, now scoring settings like IDP 1, 2, 3 or Fantasy Pros, they take into account the different aspects of play on the field and score accordingly. So normally, and I know this is blasphemy for those who are new to IDP, but there was a time where TJ Watt was not a viable IDP option because he wasn't an inside linebacker and didn't get you those high tackle numbers. But now you have these scoring settings that exist that take into account interceptions and passes defense and rank them and score those at a higher point value level. Then now somebody like a TJ Watt is more valuable.
If Jordan's still listening, he will be ecstatic with that because I know he loves some TJ Watt, as do I.
He's a great player, first of all, and then second of all, great for fantasy football purposes, using the modern scoring settings that are out there like IDP 1, 2, 3 and Fantasy Pros. Okay, so we started Dallas with Micah Parsons, Kelvin Joseph, Micah Parsons. Is there anything that really needs to be said about Micah Parsons, Nate?
No, I mean I think there's going to be with snaps, Dallas would love to be able to have everybody healthy. What's
that like?
I think we would like, from a fantasy perspective, to see Jalen Smith and or LVE not necessarily occupy all the snaps, but they'll rotate. And I think that's the one thing. If for a dynasty perspective, I've heard other people make some arguments for some of the other linebackers that we're talking about, but I think Parsons, it has to be at the top of most people's list.
And we have to imagine that in an ideal world, Leighton Vander Esch is, part of the Cowboys' long-term plans where you have Smith, Vander Esch, and Parsons, but
right.
There have been discussions that maybe that this is more of like a Vander Esch or Jalen Smith, security blanket move to get somebody in there who's a little bit more stable and reliable and better from a real football perspective, which I don't know what that is. I just know from a fantasy perspective. I don't want to confuse people there. Let's head to our nation's capital, Jamin Davis. Technically, he's listed as an outside linebacker, and he's actually pretty decent in coverage. Or he wasn't decent in coverage in college, but training camp reports have had him playing in the middle, which is great because the middle linebackers are the guys who normally get the tackles against the running backs who when they run upfield. I don't know whether I'm more excited for Parsons or Jamin Davis, to be honest with you. I feel like tackle upside and opportunity favors Davis, just because that linebacking core is so weak. And I hate to say that, for those who are, listening and saying, how could you say that they're weak? How would you know? I'm just going from a fantasy perspective. Like these guys in the linebacking core for Washington aren't scoring you a lot of points. Last year, John Bostic was their lead tackler,
right.
Lead fantasy point producer. So you get a massive upgrade with the talent of a Jamin Davis. I feel like he's going to be able to soak up so many tackle opportunities that's going to help you from a fantasy perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Parsons in Dallas, he's competing with Jalen Smith. He's competing with Leighton Vander Esch from just at the linebacker position by themselves.
And now you have Keanu O'Neal thrown into that mix too. So you have another player like Keanu. I mean, there's not as many tackles to be had and occupied in Dallas as there is in Washington, because you lose who. So remind me, the two double last name Pierre
St. Louis or St. Louis or something. Yeah.
He's out of the equation now. And so it is. I mean, personally, I know Del Rio's tight-lipped. He hasn't said that Jamin Davis is going to start on the inside, but there's a lot of rumors that he is. He's got the speed element, obviously, like we talked about with the tackles. He had 102 tackles over 10 games his junior year. So the tackle, as you say, hashtag tackle volume, is there. And if you can extrapolate his college production and prorate that into the NFL, there's a case to be made for him as defensive rookie of the year, especially if he's a 3-down back, 100%.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to inside linebackers, for those of us that are dipping our toes in IDP and stuff, I know we've talked about how fantasy relevance comes from either elite talent or elite opportunity. And with him being an inside linebacker, I know we talked about he's going to be great at stuffing the run. When it comes to dropping into coverage for a linebacker, are you concerned if he's giving up a lot of receptions? Or says it looks like for his last season, he was targeted 40 times and gave up 30 receptions. So theoretically, that could mean tackles if he's letting him catch it and tackling it. But like, how do you do you have to worry about coverage stats at all when you're looking at rookies?
Nate?
I mean, yes and no. Realistically, I want him to be targeted pretty heavily. I mean, that would be ideal. And the way I look at this, and I haven't done the numbers and the studies to see if there's a direct correlation, but when you have Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, and Jonathan Allen rushing the quarterback, the likelihood that his average depth of target is going to be anything more than probably 7-8 yards is not real likely, which is great because that's typically the roaming area for someone like a Jamin Davis, where they might be quick intermediate passes and the tackle volume would play to his benefit.
And on the flip side, Michael Bauer was just on a few minutes ago with us on the live stream. His favorite guy, Nate Gary, is an example of, somebody who would give up receptions, but give up long receptions, like having an average depth of target of over 10 yards. So this guy is giving up first downs after first downs. And it's great. Yeah, he got the tackle volume, but from a real football perspective, you can't give up so many first downs and expect to be on the field. And there's a reason why he was pulled, I think, 4 or 5 games into the regular season last year at the linebacker position. I got IDP Power Hour here. What is up?
What up, man?
What up?
So it's a delicate balance, but I think what Nate was saying is right there is spot on. Is if you have a front 4 or front 3 that can really get to the quarterback and get those shallow passes, then give up all the catches you want as long as you're getting the tackle volume.
Able to stay on the field though, right?
Right, without sacrificing your ability to stay on the field, which goes hand in hand with the short or shallow average depth of target, which prevents first downs and the offense moving the chains.
That makes sense.
Let's head over to Atlanta. Look, I'm a huge fan of Richie Grant. He's not my favorite safety here, but technically he hasn't earned starter status, but I think it's only a matter of time once we get into training camp that you're going to see this guy. Amongst all safeties, according to Pro Football Focus, he was second in defensive stops against the run. So basically he's your hybrid linebacker there. Atlanta plays a lot of 5-2, which means 5 defensive backs and 2 linebackers at all times. So he's basically your third linebacker. He could be your third quintessential linebacker there, which is great for tackle upside and volume. And we say that all these IDP scoring settings have evolved to incorporate more players with different talents and skill sets. At the end of the day, IDP is based on tackles. That is the bread and butter of all IDP scoring. And then from there, things sprout.
Mhm.
Do you have anything on Richie Grant that the Ford fans should be aware of there, Nate?
I mean, anytime that you have three safeties out of the equation now, DeMonte Kazee gone, obviously the aforementioned Cal Neal, it just opens up playing time. And at this spot right here, he's in a good, he's going to be, as Doug said, or well, sorry, I don't know who exactly for the IDP Power Hour could be. Could be anybody. He will be fantastic. Now that might be a few games in, but yeah, I mean, as a Cal Neal replacement, if you could interject Cal Neal's opportunities into Richie Grant, I like Richie Grant because personally, I think he's just fun to watch. And I know that sounds like such a generic thing, but again, it goes back to what we're talking about IDP. The reason why people play, sometimes it's also fun to watch the defensive side and have players that you want to watch. Jonathan Abram is a guy that I talked about last year ad nauseum, as far as if you want to get into IDP and you want a reason to root, or you want to have a rooting interest and you want to grab someone new and say, here, come here, watch IDP. Let's focus on IDP. Who do you want to watch? Watch Jonathan Abram for, a game. And then they leave going, holy hell, that dude is awesome to watch. I can't wait to have him on my team because he's productive and he's exciting. That's what you want. You don't want kind of boring. That's stupid.
I was watching on the NFL feed on Facebook, and they had this. I think it was last year where they had this thing on HBO where it was with Belichick, and Belichick and Rich Eisen, I believe, where they were having, it's like a 100 series where they're bringing on their favorite players 1 to 100, and they had Ed Reed showcased on there, and they were showing a play that Peyton Manning was getting intercepted on by Ed Reed, and Bill Belichick, the guy who's probably the greatest coach of all time, is saying this was the greatest play he's ever seen from a free safety. And the scheme and the logic behind how Ed Reed did what he was doing, and how he made the interception off of Peyton Manning in one of these games. It's such a cerebral position, more so I think than offense. Offense, like you have your outside wide receivers, you got your slot wide receivers, where they're going to go.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily know where these defensive players are going to go, even though they're lined up at a certain spot on the field. Like, they could have different responsibilities. They could have somebody playing closer to the line of scrimmage who you think is going to go tackle the running back. No, but they're going to drop off in coverage, and you have no idea. It's a crapshoot in that regard, and that kind of is what makes it fun. The more versatile a player is for you from a real football perspective, they're more versatile for you from a fantasy football perspective.
Yeah. And Brian, like you, from a dynasty standpoint, one of the things that I'm sure you look at from an offensive scenario is you look at hierarchy. You see who's moving on the way out, who has that chance if they're stepping into a role. Is the role going to expand because someone has only on a 1-year deal, et cetera? This is the same scenario with Richie Grant. Deron Harmon, Eric Harris, and Fabian Moreau are all on 1-year deals. At the end of this year, they're all three potentially could be gone. And then you see no split shares or situations, which most project Richie Grant to probably take the job and run with it. But single high safety situations, he's great in. I'm tempering my expectations just on all the free safeties necessarily as a whole. But boy, I do like Richie Grant.
He is listed as their starting free safety for whatever it's worth on a depth chart in June. So.
It's worth something, and there's a lot of names there too. Here's a fun stat I didn't know. As a sophomore, he tied for third in all of FBS with 6 interceptions and 109 tackles.
That's ridiculous.
Wow, it is ridiculous.
Speaking of ridiculous, let's go over to Carolina, where Teddy, your home team there, J.C. Horn, cornerback, first-round pick. He was the cornerback 14 in all of college football in pass breakups. So what does that mean for you from a fantasy standpoint? Well, think one pass breakup is worth 3 points. Okay. And what if this guy gets you 9 points a game just off of pass breakups? And you throw on top of that the tackle numbers, you throw on top of that the interception potential. Like, you have somebody who could be a game changer, and at the cornerback position. And now Nate has said, and I agree with him, your safeties are normally the way to go. Your strong safeties are the way to go if you have a defensive back only spot. But if you have a cornerback dedicated spot, these are things to look for. And the thing is that he was targeted a lot in college, but still got the 14th most pass breakups, yet still had a low completion percentage. So it's one of those things where guys would still test him, which is remarkable that somebody with his talent could still get tested, but they still did. And he still kept showing them, hey, guess what? I can play. And so this is a great situation in Carolina. The front seven is young. They have Jeremy Chin at safety. who doubles as a
And he's
linebacker sometimes. It's
actually
kinda
going to
crazy.
play safety this year because we brought in Perriman and Hassan Reddick. So he's actually going to be sliding back to safety.
Right. So again, that secondary is kind of young. So I see J.C. Horn as a cornerback cornerback that can produce from an IDP perspective, especially if you're playing in quarterback only dedicated spaces.
Absolutely, he's walking into playing time. He's going to be the second starting quarterback with Dante Jackson. So, yeah.
Let's head over to now New Orleans. Alex Anzalone is no longer there to pair off with Demario Davis, Mr. Hashtag Tackle Machine.
Yeah.
Pete Werner, however, is a rookie who just got drafted there, and he's been listed as somebody who's very sideline to sideline, can get into coverage plays pretty well. When it comes to the inside linebacker position, he was the linebacker 44 in defensive stops against the run. So, here's the thing. I say linebacker 44. What does that tell you? That tells you that there are a lot of linebackers that can help you in fantasy football. Okay. But you never know, depending on the size of your league, you never know how many roster positions are taken. You never know with bye weeks who has the potential to have a really big game. And so it's good to know these players who you never know when they can jump in and fill in for you. Demario Davis is getting a little bit older each year. Sorry to say that, Demario. But Pete Werner could be somebody who can take over that spot and be a viable IDP option. So this is where Dynasty comes in, Brian, where you want to take advantage of these players who have a little bit more opportunity probably down the road than they do currently. Do you have any? Go
ahead. I was to say, if you want to talk about Dynasty also on New Orleans, talk about Peyton Turner out of Houston.
He was going to be mine.
And I can let you talk about him, Teddy. I don't have
got it.
This is if you ask me, I think this is kind of a make or break season for both Cameron Jordan and Marcus Davenport. Davenport has gotten a lot of hype so far in OTAs that he's ready. But again, what are you going to say? I don't know. I felt pretty, I really don't know how I'm going to do. Trey Hendrickson really made me look bad last year, and I'm sad. No, he's going to come in. He's going to do his best. But freak, 6'5", 270 monster off the corner. Probably. There's a lot of people saying he was a little of a reach just because they thought he might be a mid-second round. There's others that I heard that think that he might be one of the best edge rushers in the draft. Obviously, you have this grade, difference between the two, but I like Peyton Turner. Teddy, what did you see a little bit more about him?
Well, the only thing that I was going to say with him is that, obviously he is going to be placing Hendrickson, as you mentioned, who's in Cincinnati now. Mm-hmm. And so obviously being behind Davenport and being behind Cameron Jordan isn't where you want to be. But there were some reports that said that he actually could flash as like some plays, some snaps as an inside lineman as well. Yeah. So at the very least, he gets him on the field. Mm-hmm. And so if he can show up and be a reliable backup defensive tackle, and I think especially when we're talking dynasty, he could do enough to get enough experience on the field and flash enough talent that he may answer the question on whether or not they're going to keep both Davenport and Jordan going forward.
No, that's exactly right. That's, great call. Obviously, like I said, more snaps the better. And no offense to New Orleans, but they have a lot of holes across their defenses as a whole, if you want to put it that way. But seriously, linebackers weak. Zach Bond hasn't played great. I don't know. Both are in situations to monitor because playing time could be in their favor as the season progresses.
Speaking of playing time, playing into somebody's favor, Zaven Collins in Arizona, inside linebacker over there with Isaiah Simmons. This could be it right here. This could be a linebacking core that just is IDP gold here. Isaiah Simmons last year as a rookie coming out of Clemson, he was like a Swiss Army knife in college, and I think the coaches just basically tried to have him do too much, and it got to the point where it just was super confusing and just mixed them all up. Well, now they're dedicating him to inside linebacker, and Zaven Collins is coming in strictly as an inside linebacker. Zaven Collins, I could see having immediate impact for you this year, as well as being a good dynasty linebacker or IDP player. Mm-hmm. Then we go to Minnesota with Chaz Surratt, who's technically behind Ryan Connolly, I want to say, on the depth chart. Something tells me that Chaz Surratt is going to be just fine. The number LB14 in defensive stops against the run. So, again, those run stopping linebackers are always going to be the bread and butter for you when it comes to IDP scoring. I want to get into somebody for you, Nate. to say that the Kansas City Chiefs linebackers have been lacking from an IDP perspective, and I won't speak to their real football perspective, but is an understatement. What are your thoughts on Nick Bolton? You know, this guy was the number 4 linebacker in all of college football for inside linebackers for defensive stops against the run. This guy, he gets to the ball and he gets those tackles that are valuable for IDP.
He's a monster. He's going to be. I don't want to sit here and play the homer card and have everybody just assume that I'm going on a tangent because he plays for KC. But watching him play at Mizzou, I had a nice opportunity to watch him play, and he is just. I mean, he plays football. I mean, he is a football player through and through. There's no doubt about it. I love the fact that some of the things that I looked up is that I don't feel like I even paid attention to these enough. For consecutive years as a linebacker, he led the SEC in total stops for back-to-back years. The SEC, no offense to the AAC or the MAC or any of the other conferences, but that's big boy pants. He put on his big boy pants every year. And I mean, if you look at the past 22 games, 16 and a half tackles for a loss, 202 tackles, 15 passes defensed. Jorge, what we talk about? That's about 45 points, if I'm not mistaken, based off of a 1-2-3 scoring setting. 3 sacks, and the second highest graded linebacker, according to Pro Football Focus, next to Micah Parsons. He's in a spot right now where it looks like he should be the 3-down back in KC. He's got plenty of opportunity across, for run stopping in the West. I can't say enough. He has his flaws, as most do, but I think he makes up for that with just the motor and just the ability to want to hit somebody.
Hey Brian, you've been pretty quiet. Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing what we're saying about all these players, what questions do you have particularly for Dynasty? Like how, if any, regarding IDP strategy?
That was going to be one of my questions tonight is among the rookies with impact for right now that you're talking about, what were going to be some of the ones that would be on the Dynasty radar for folks who are, doing startups or rookie drafts and, might be stashes. And you've mentioned a couple.
No, totally. It's similar to offense. You want the opportunity and you want the long-term value. It's tricky because everybody in IDP, I feel like there is an opportunity for them to have fantasy point value versus you can't necessarily find that as much on offense. It's really an embarrassment of riches, actually, when you look at it from a dynasty perspective, because you can load up on so much talent from a fantasy producing standpoint on offense for contributors that are now going to help you versus guys who are going to help you down the road. So if anything, IDP makes dynasty fantasy football a little bit easier because now you're dedicating these players to your roster that otherwise couldn't have helped you if you were just playing in an offensive league. And speaking of roster construction, with Scott Fishbowl going around, kickers are now flex eligible. Well, let's say you're in a fantasy football league. Let's say you're one of those people who are not kicker truthers and you want to add a flex. Well, why not throw in an IDP flex? What do you got to lose? The thing about IDP, and I've seen so many people on Twitter and on Facebook just, on one side of the coin, like, oh, IDP is stupid. I don't like to play IDP. On the other side of the coin, I've seen people say, oh, if you're not playing IDP, you're doing fantasy football wrong. Our stance here is, do what makes you happy, but we can guarantee you that fantasy football with IDP is so much better from our perspective, just because for all the reasons we've been stating all show long. Let's finish up the show. So in terms of cornerbacks only, again, I'm going to harp on these cornerbacks. I think they have potential here in IDP. We already talked about J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain in Denver, Greg Newsome in Cleveland. And I feel like it's crazy because Cleveland is stacked at safety, at cornerback.
So many defensive backs.
It's ridiculous. But I'm going to finish off with my favorite safety, and it's a free safety. It's Javon Holland. And I mentioned Ed Reed earlier in the show in terms of his Hall of Fame legendary career. And I'm not going to say that Javon Holland is going to be an Ed Reed. But what do these two free safeties have in common? These guys are ball hawks and can make plays all over the field. And you look at what's going on in the camp reports now or the OTAs right now. Javon Holland is just basically playing like a man possessed. And Tua's threw like 5 interceptions last day or a couple days ago, and I think Javon Holland had like 2 or 3 of those guys.
It was pouring down rain. It was bad.
Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he better get used to it because he's in Miami. So
I'd say I'm not a Tua supporter, so don't.
I don't think he's going to be horrible. I just don't think he's going to be so. If his weapons can stay healthy, but that's for another show.
Sure.
Nate, do you have anything else to touch on when it comes to IDP rookies for us today?
I mean, the only other names that stand out, and there's some like I'll give a deep dynasty one that Brian might hit close home to you. His name is Hamza Nasiruddin, and he is linebacker with the Jets. The one thing is that you look at Blake Cashman. He's already injured. Opportunity breeds success, as we've said multiple times. A lot of buzz around camp. They like what they're seeing out of him. He's selected by the new general manager, under the new regime. So it feels like he doesn't have to prove as much, or he's not. The others are going to have to try to prove more. If you're looking at that, and then that actually goes. He's going to be able to learn from C.J. Mosley, which I think is a huge just stepping stone right there, is to be able to get a healthy C.J. Mosley and him back. The only other two that I really, there's so many more. We could probably go on and on. I like Jalen Phillips. I really do. I feel like with the Miami, there's competition there. We know he's got on the defensive end, and I think he'll be the outside linebacker there. But he was the number 1 recruit in 2017 in America. So the pedigree's there. He came in, had the ankle injuries, transferred from UCLA over to Miami, put on 50 pounds, dedicated himself to football, and it really made it known. 15.5 tackles for a loss, 8 sacks. He runs a 4.57 40, 36-inch vert, and a 10.5 broad jump. Crazy numbers for a guy that big. And really, the competition I don't think is that crazy. I mean, if you look at the edge, Van Ginkel, Vince Beagle, it's just okay. I feel like pure edge rushers, he's one of the ones that I'm going to want to focus on a little bit. And then he was also the first pass rusher selected in the draft. I don't know if that means anything, but it might mean something. The last is a great story. I do like Kwity Paye. I don't know if as a rookie, if he's going to just immediately jump in, but ultra smart, ultra athletic. His mom, basically, she broke away from war-torn Liberia, one of the most dangerous spots in the world, and brought him to America. And so he's already overcome everything you could possibly need to do. Playing football, shit, that's easy. That's nothing compared to getting out of a war-torn country. So I think he has that ability, and he learns the playbook extremely well. Obviously, his mom, he wanted to play at this high school that was like one of the top 5 high schools. Well, she had to work 3 jobs for him to do so. He told her, he said, I promise you, if you pay for this school, I'm going to get a full ride scholarship. And she did. She worked 3 different jobs, paid for the school. It's like $30,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. And he got the full ride at Michigan. And what did he do at Michigan? I mean, nothing short of become what we see now, is this driven defensive end. I love the story. He was Indy ranked 20th last year in total pressures. And that was a good defense. You imagine playing alongside Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner constantly. The one-on-ones will be there. Might take a little bit of time, but Kwity Paye is going to be such a fun person to watch, especially just from the story standpoint. The narrative always makes you so much more excited to watch him go forward.
I'm rooting for him now. I didn't know that story.
Yeah. You drafted him in our Dynasty IDP only league, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
You're the one who took him. Okay.
I like stories, and so I went with only players that came from war-torn countries and or.
Well, the motivation's there.
You want to have an edge to, yeah.
I did not have a great team.
There you go. All right, folks. That takes us through our entire episode of rookie evaluations for individual defensive players. Coming up really soon, we have a lot of four-eyed sleepers that are going to be coming out in terms of articles for players who can help you win fantasy championships this year, as well as our divisional previews are going to start coming out in article form. I want to say in about a month, but our podcasts for divisional previews, which will be a little bit differently formatted, should be coming out pretty soon. Brian, Teddy, Bill, Jonathan. I mean, they've been cranking out so many articles over at fantasyandframes.com. We literally have stuff going out every day. Zach, just everybody is doing such a great job. Ted, Nate, you, Everybody's just been doing such a great job. So head over to fantasyandframes.com. Check out all of our articles that we have going out there to get you ready for the fantasy football season, both this season and beyond, as well as check out our rankings for Dynasty. We have rankings for offense. We have rankings for IDP. We have rankings for team defense. If you still play that malarkey. Yes, I said malarkey. I'm aging myself right there. And anyhow, so for Brian, for Nate, for Teddy, I'm Jorge. We'll catch you next week, folks.
Get off our lawn.
Malarkey.
Malarkey.